drama continues to play out, of course, on the left coast, Southern California, the greater Los Angeles area. We have checked in and out on that story intermittently over the last several days and weeks, certainly. And wanted to check in with an old KFAN intern who is now based in Southern California, does a lot of work at SoFi Stadium, who has found himself in the middle of this tragedy, in the middle of this madness as well. Brian Grant, kind enough to join us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Brian, thanks for the time, man. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Great to be back with the family.
Yeah, it's so. When were you affiliated with KFAN via internship?
I want to say those were back in the 08, 09, maybe 2010 days. A good stint across all the programs.
Nice.
Started with PA, worked up with Common and yourself for a while, so it's great to hear a friendly voice again, too.
That is a long time, man. It just makes me feel old, but I'm glad things have worked out for you in Southern California. So give us a sense of where your residence is, and quite frankly, based on what Guardsy is telling me, some of the miraculous, I guess the miraculous part about the fact that your home is still not damaged, correct?
That's correct, and can't have this conversation without a really great degree of sort of graciousness, fortunate attitudes,
yep.
And thankfulness, because amidst our neighborhood, which is just north of Woodbury Avenue in Altadena, I was able to sneak back into our neighborhood before the National Guard went into place. And sort of harden some of the perimeters around the neighborhood. Blocks north of my house are 80 to 90% gone. Full houses razed to the ground. You can see the charred remains of, probably 30 plus vehicles along the street. It was a real surreal sight Wednesday, and Thursday of last week. And to be able to walk down to our house and see it still standing, just, incredible amount of thanks for, whatever your, deity gave us a moment. But fortunate to be where we are. It's a pretty surreal state.
Is there a more rational explanation for why you were spared, having to do with the way your home is configured or what it's made of, or just the way the fires went? Does anything else enter into this as well beyond what you mentioned?
Difficult to tell, but I'll go to the story of my in-laws, who are, maybe 5 to 7 minutes east of our house. They got a call from a friend of theirs on Wednesday morning, as he was driving by. It said that their lawn had sort of caught fire from an ember. He extinguished the initial lawn fire. They raced home, started fighting whatever they could with the hoses they had around the house. And unfortunately, the 5 houses across from them caught fire. They fought the embers from those fires the majority of Wednesday morning. Those 5 houses are all to the ground, and the rest of their neighborhood or the rest of their street stands intact. So credit to any of the fire personnel that did assist. But on some level, there are certainly countless stories of homeowners who either returned or tried to fight what they could during these periods of just really drastic high winds. To be perfectly honest, you get evacuated on a Tuesday night. You're in a major populated, pretty metropolitan city. Yep. You really don't think your house is in that much danger, and to arrive back Wednesday morning to such destruction was sort of jarring.
It had to be. So in your case, is that how it went? Tuesday night, you set the scene for us on the very front end, how this played out for you and your family.
Yeah, quite ironically, we got some notices that there were some things moving in and around. Ended up at my in-laws' house, northern Pasadena, and we could sort of see from their front door, we could see the Eaton fire developed like north and east of where we were. Certainly didn't look good to start. You could see the orange kind of sky and the smoke coming down from the mountain. We evacuated Tuesday night, sort of took a fairly serious stance on, obviously it didn't look good. Didn't want to, but we evacuated Tuesday night, continued to get updates through Wednesday as the day turned. And, the updates were definitely not good. And the winds moved very strongly and started throwing additional heat, fire, and embers across most of northern Altadena, and it moved west as the winds did, and then pushed up into the hills as well until it was a pretty aggressive fire, and trying to draw lines of where local fire resources could fight it. Moving from street to street to try and establish a perimeter where they could get hooked up and start fighting with whatever water they had available was a pretty daunting task most of Wednesday.
Was it a challenge to get back to your home to see exactly whether anything was left? How did that process play out for you?
Quite realistically, we're near Hollywood, and I don't know that Hollywood could ever recreate what we drove into. Coming over the freeway to get back into the area, you could see the massive cloud of smoke that was still sitting over most of the neighborhoods. You got into the neighborhood, and there's a cemetery not that far from our house, and the northern road of that cemetery was really the artery we were able to use to get back into the neighborhood Wednesday during the day and in the afternoon. Ton of danger, down power lines, down communication lines, and not necessarily because of anything specifically, but literally the attached house that power line used to attach to was literally gone, right? So there's nothing more for it to attach to. So they're strewn across the ground. The remains of charred cars down entire streets, just white with the heat, was visible. We were able to sneak through those down power lines, kind of arrive back into the neighborhood. You see to see the gas lines of houses that used to stand still burning, right? Because some of the gas lines were still on. So you see it as this little flickering flame in all of the midst of this destruction was sort of a pretty surreal sight too. And to get back to the house and see it standing was really impactful. To see some of the neighbors, some of whom had stayed overnight, trying to ensure that they were wetting roofs and wetting lawns. Again, we have incredibly dry conditions right now, which is not optimistic or not optimal. So folks are trying to keep anything and everything as wet as they could. So you had people up on their roofs, spraying their roofs, running their sprinkler systems if they still had water and power, trying to keep their lawns from drying out. It was a very interesting couple of days.
Former KFAN intern Brian Grant, kind enough to join us. He's now based in Southern California. You mentioned you're in Altadena. Is your part of that community relatively safe now? I mean, we keep getting these reports of, okay, things are settling down, but then the winds are going to start whipping up again. So what's the current situation on the ground in your neck of the woods?
Our neighborhood is currently sort of the southwestern edge of the evacuation zone. Even the street or the block adjacent to us to the west has been somewhat repopulated. And the challenge with using the term repopulation at this point is kind of problematic because, yes, our house still stands, and we're very, very fortunate for that fact. But as we look at the community, it's an older community, and there are certainly, unfortunately, lead-based paints, asbestos, other harmful toxins and particles that are unfortunately now in the air. We've got a long opportunity to look at really what inhabitable means to those neighborhoods, even if you can get back to your house or your dwelling. As we start to pick up this rubble, it might not even be habitable from an air quality standpoint. So there's a lot of factors available to what makes the neighborhood safe. We're fortunate to find out today that LA County, LA City, other resources were able to assess our house and the majority of our neighborhood. They keep us updated on a little app that sort of shows how they're progressing through those assessments, and our assessment came back fairly positive. So we're really optimistic maybe in the next couple of days to hear we could even go back. We're not sure how, but maybe there's some items that we could grab out of the house or to salvage.
Sure.
To be quite honest, in an emergency, I shared this story. I thought I would know everything that I wanted to grab, right? In a moment of levity, you're like, yeah, I'll grab this, and this. In an emergency, I probably was able to remember maybe 50% of the things that I thought I needed.
Yeah.
So my wife is happy to know that I managed to remember to grab my wedding ring, but quite honestly, I forgot my Super Bowl ring. So was able to sneak back and recover that on Wednesday, but happy to know that she was a priority over my Super Bowl ring in terms of my ability to remember what to grab.
Where are you now?
So we're currently temporarily in some family housing in Montebello, California. It's about 30 minutes drive southeast of Pasadena, Altadena. So a nice little community, unaffected by either the Eaton or the Palisades fire at the moment. And again, for anybody listening out there who's affected by the Palisades fire, our Eaton fire in Altadena is certainly bad, but also hearts go out to those in the Palisades that, maybe even some of the stories there are even more gruesome, even more devastating than what we have. So, a degree of thankfulness across the board for sure.
What do you, Brian, what do you say to those around you who did lose everything? Those homes were burned to the ground. What can you, words seem to be so insignificant because you can't possibly, capture the weight of the loss of not just physical stuff, memories, a lot of people, in these homes for long periods of time, et cetera. What do you say, or what have you said?
It is incredibly difficult to find words. And for those that aren't familiar with the area, Altadena is a multi-generational community. It's an unincorporated part of LA County. So a lot of folks have settled there and may have even multiple generations living on their property, right? You have grandparents who are living with their sons and daughters. Their sons and daughters now have, infants or a third generation on that property. And to see, normal houses or the initial build plus an, additional dwelling unit or ADU that we have out here in California, to see both of those, living locations burned, just, it's hard to find the words. You find an opportunity to express gratitude. But, to be honest, there's a degree of what I would call sort of survivor's guilt that, we still have four walls and a roof when so many others don't, that trying to find those words of just, thankfulness that for the most part, people got out safely. People got out with their lives is probably the biggest thing. Fortunate to see that the death toll on these fires is, relatively low in terms of, overall people and, dwellings affected. So I think you take a lot of degree of thankfulness for life, and learn that those other things that you may have lost at least are not your life, right? You can try and rebuild and try and remember those memories or recreate them, but yeah, words are very difficult for those affected right now.
So, the $64,000 question moving forward is the obvious one, is that, okay, what's the process for rebuilding? How, how long will that take? What is practical? Can these communities, as much as people are all saying the right thing, which is we'll be back, we're strong, we're resolute, there's so much too, especially given the amount of area, as you know, obviously better than I here, and the number of homes, et cetera, in the series of fires we're talking about. So what's the answer to that question? Can anybody even calculate, the practicalities of the rebuild?
I think the word I would also use is patience. Resilience is one thing, but a degree of patience is going to be fairly critically important for all of us moving forward, at least in my opinion. I sort of woke up maybe day one of the fire and had these, or maybe even seeing the house standing, I had these naive assumptions that, we could get back into the house at a reasonable time. Maybe it would only be a couple days for us to get back into the house, but quite realistically, that timeline has sort of started to evolve into weeks, months, probably even to year or years.
Yeah.
before all of this gets rebuilt. I mean, we're talking about structures and thousands of them. There's only so much you can build at one time. There's only so many builders and contractors. There's only so much wood, lumber, steel, concrete that you can pour at any one time to get a house built or a place constructed. And look, Los Angeles is dealing with it on two fronts. You've got it in the Palisades. You've got it in the Pasadena, Altadena area. There aren't generally enough just building resources to be able to put a community back together. So a degree of patience to make sure that we can get it done right and get it done properly. Again, we've been on community meetings where we understand just the hazardous material cleanup of those lead-based paints or those houses that did at one point contain asbestos, or you've got gasoline that leaked into the ground, things like that. Like, there are professionals who will do that and certainly be of great assistance, but they're not going to be able to get to everybody overnight. And there are a lot of people to get to. So, the community is definitely banded in its desire to rebuild, but that rebuilding process probably looks more like a year to more than that before we start to see it return to even a portion of what it once was.
Listening to you has me thinking about a great friend of the show, a longtime listener, originally from the Twin Cities, named Patrick Laughlin, who moved to Maui a number of years ago and now has lived there. His nickname was Boat Captain Guy because he was a guy who, took people out on tours off of Maui, a wonderful guy who we've had on the show many times. And he was based in Lahaina when that fire took place. And what struck me then is, and even to this day, because then at the 1 year mark, we had him, after the fire, we had him on. And one of the things we talked about was the rebuild. And it hadn't hardly started. This was a year later. And I think about this because as horrific as that was, and there was much greater loss of life, as I recall, as horrific as that scene was, nowhere near as big an area as we were talking about in Southern California. And they're still, and I don't know if it's the bureaucracy, I don't know if it's politics, I don't know, there's the complications of a rebuild that would take place regardless, but they're almost nothing a year later from that in that sort of central area of commerce has been built at all and changed at all. And that was, relatively speaking, a much smaller area than you're talking about, Southern Los Angeles, California.
Yeah. I would say the leadership within the governmental organizations and communities have at least expressed a desire to try and find ways to creatively shorten the needs to rebuild. And, they're talking about putting a permitting office, centrally located in Altadena so that you can get one-step permitting, on your rebuilds, or get, an assessment of your drawings in one step. That's great, and certainly appreciate that, and hope that those things come to fruition, that the degree of bureaucracy and red tape can be limited only to those essential functions that ensure the community is built appropriately. But even then, once it starts, again, we're dealing with some degree of fairly significant, cost increases. Sure. For temporary housing. There are a lot of assistance efforts, in the hotel community, certainly, but trying to get, your wood delivered, trying to get your appliances, trying to get steel or concrete poured, I'm sure is going to be more costly in the next 6 months to 24 months, probably at the outset. And yeah, we are probably looking at a more realistic timeline that involves a plurality of years as opposed to just, hey, we'll be back in a couple of months. Well,
it's
a long time.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but with Patrick, part of it was, as you say, part of it's the cleanup, the toxic material. That in itself, even in a community, relatively smaller in Lahaina, was enormous. And again, you mentioned, you've alluded to it a couple times, you got to get certain stuff out of there and cleaned up before you can even begin the process of rebuild as well. So it's daunting. You've done a really good job, though, I think, of painting a picture and bringing it home to people on this end, which is very much appreciated. I'm glad you're doing relatively well. I hope that certainly continues. And again, we appreciate you giving us the time this afternoon. Thanks very much, Brian.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys. Thanks for all the support. Good vibes from home, and still have a lot of family in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. So quite ironically, my parents, who reside in Arden Hills, are out with us helping take care of my 2.5-year-old. So, it's nice to have family both on the radio and in the community. So appreciate you all very much.
Thanks again, man. We'll be in touch. Thanks, Brian. Brian Grant is a former KFAN intern going back to basically he said, I think 2008, 9, 10, that range, now based in Southern California, works at SoFi Stadium and is living in has a home relatively undamaged compared to so many around him. Altadena, California, one of the areas that has been extremely hard hit. Let's do this. We've got Guardsy with an update, and then we'll try to get back on schedule.
The Fan does want to give you a shot to put $1,000 in your hand, even on Bumper to Bumper. With our national cash contest, you can enter the keyword, what's today, Thursday? Check at KFAN.com. Go to KFAN.com and enter the keyword check.
I thought that our last guest, Brian Grant, did a great job giving us a sense of the loss, at the gut level in his own community. I really appreciate the time that he gave us. It can't be the easiest thing to talk about. He admits they're lucky in terms of their home to this point, but I thought it was a good overview of the challenges and on a human level what people are dealing with. A texter wondered whether Paul Majors would be a good interview right now. It's not a bad idea, although he now is based in Palm Springs. He lives in Palm Springs, moved several years ago. Now, he knows the L.A. area very well. So I'll take that under advisement for either later tomorrow's Friday, maybe early next week, because I'm guessing Majors could still be a good gauge on, trying to sort of capture the story and have some perspective. He obviously was based in Southern California. I think it was a CBS affiliate in Los Angeles.
KCBS.
For a number of years as well. So, and it's been a while since we've caught up with him. So maybe we'll try to get a little a bonus Paul Majors next week. That would not be the worst of it. You had given me, before our discussion with Brian Grant, you had brought in to me a photo. That what do they call that kind of photo that you sent me?
Like a heat map.
A heat map,
basically.
That indicated, that showed a lot of the fires and then the location of Grant's house, which was somehow amazingly intact. And you see this every once in a while. I didn't get into the insurance issue with him because it's like another 15 minutes to do it.
Yep.
But there's been a lot of conversation, obviously, about that the last thing I read, I believe, was that even before these fires, that most insurance companies literally were not allowing the start of weren't granting any new insurance policies throughout much of that area.
Jeez.
And then, obviously, the numbers are going to go through the roof at this point as well. You get back to, if you rebuild in the exact same place you were before, how much trouble are you asking for? Is it just likely that we're waiting for the next conflagration? There's plenty of politics, as we talked about earlier. I tend to believe that there have been some blunders made, largely having to do with what they call the controlled fires. Now, whether that would have affected those areas, I don't know. It's a fair point. But we said this from the beginning. I think it's probably most likely that there are a lot of reasons for why this got as bad as it was, and in some cases still is. It may not be, chances are good it probably doesn't have anything to do with DEI. Realistically, maybe we'll find some way in which it might, but that's not very realistic. I know there was a big battle between, I think, the fire chief and the mayor of Los Angeles that I think they've since spoken, that in which the fire chief was pretty frontal about saying where she thought there were failures in terms of the need for greater resources that they had been clamoring for. So I think whoever happened to me, a lot of what this comes down to is, in following the story, is whoever's in power, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, you ask questions about how they have wielded their power in this area. I don't think that's politicizing it. I think you go to the people in power and you say, where did they potentially drop the ball? Where did this have nothing to do with who was in charge and had more to do with just the unusual nature of these close to, I think, at times, at the worst of it, hurricane-level winds, for God's sake.
Right, the wind was ridiculous.
Ridiculous, yeah. So there's a lot of things there. But I thought, the Pacific Palisades has gotten most of the attention because it's gotten wiped out, pretty much, right?
Yep.
Altadena is I think, economically speaking, not on the Pacific Palisades level, right? But is another area that's gotten pretty much, if not decimated, pounded to a great degree.
And you look at the heat map that Brian sent me and sent us, and he sent a bunch of photos as well from his block and other blocks.
Yeah.
It is unbelievable how his house is still standing when you see what's just one block north of him. And then it's also, your house is standing, and he talked a little bit about this, but what's left of the community, like his kids' daycare is just completely gone.
That's it. So having your house there, great, but
what's the neighborhood? Can you still live there? Are the amenities and everything that you had in the neighborhood, is that still available? J.J. Redick talked about that. The rec center that his family would go to, their house is gone, but also everything else in the neighborhood is gone, too.
So even if you're lucky enough to have the house that's standing, which Brian Grant does, is, as you say, what else is around me that can reestablish any semblance of a quality of life? And again, at the very front end, too, you've got the hazardous materials issues that have to be addressed before you even get to Plan B or C or, perish the thought, actual rebuilding. So it's ongoing, right? I haven't checked today where we are in terms of the winds. He mentioned there's still areas where there's evacuation that's going on, and you feel like it's like never completely necessarily over, right? Other than in some areas there's not much left to burn, right?
Sure.
Some of the areas that have gotten hit the hardest. There's a lot of footage of Pacific Coast Highway along there, correct? One of the most beautiful, highways in the United States of America, right?
A friend of mine that lives out there, whose house is not affected, they tweeted out something that during COVID, like the PCH, as they call it, was like the escape just to basically feel like you were living.
Right.
Because you couldn't do anything. Like in lockdown, we were all there. And to drive the same route that they did, they said they did it almost like every day.
Isn't that where Majerus called us from a couple times?
I think it
Coast
was.
Highway?
Yes.
He did, yeah.
Absolutely.
Rick Majerus, yeah.
And it is an amazing drive and an awesome
remarkable.
drive.
Yeah.
And, everybody should do the cliched thing when you go to California, get a convertible and just go drive up, even if it's from LAX to Malibu or Santa Barbara, wherever it is. And they were talking about how that was where they went just to feel like normal. And to drive by it and see it essentially all gone is just gut-wrenching.
Let's do this. Let's get back on schedule because we went long with Brian because I thought he had so much to tell us. Good information, and you can certainly sense the emotion as well. But we got the inbox we're going to open up. Cato Kalin is going to help us do our Ode to a Dead Guy segment at 5:30. We are out at 6 tonight for Golden Gopher men's basketball. The Gophers are hosting the University of Michigan Wolverines. So, Cato later, top 5 at 5, yet to come, which I'm sure will include maybe some sound from the summit between the head coach of the Vikings, the general manager of the Vikings, and the media jackals as well. So a full show the rest of the way, but let's hit the inbox. Dr. Dan's inbox is next. One quick text before we get to the inbox. This is from John out of Watertown. I'm in the construction material supply business. Regarding the rebuild in California, it takes about 2 or 2+ years to get through all the government regulations, stormwater and environmental studies, and getting building permits, etc. In most states, this takes months. Regarding insurance, the state regulators have not allowed insurance providers to raise their rates commensurate with the risk associated with living there. So 7 of the main U.S. insurers have stopped providing coverage. Sad state of affairs. Prayers for all of them. are in order. He's right on a lot of this. And frankly, there's a lot of lefties who have reached a point where even before this story, but I think especially now after this story, who said this ain't going to work any longer. The approach that the state of California has tended to take, that it ends up being counterproductive for people and has for quite some time. And on the insurance thing, that's the rub, is you can say, well, you know what? We're not going to let you raise the rates, but in the end, you lose because what the agencies do is then they just say, we're out. Now, the state has a program in which you can get some insurance there. In some cases, what I've read is it's fairly bare bones, that there's not a lot to it, but it's very complicated. But when it comes to the idea of one of the things that's hurt growth, frankly, in California and has basically made a lot of people who don't have the means to move is the bureaucracy, how expensive it has gotten. And the subject, even among lefties, I think, is now front and center because there's an awareness that in certainly the short term, you're going to have to find ways to cut through the bureaucracy unless you want to take 50 years to give yourself a chance to rebuild.
It's time for Dr. Dan's Inbox.
Oh, we get letters.
It's that time again.
It's been a minute.
Yeah, it has. Well, you're out every Thursday.
Not every Thursday, but I was out a couple of Thursdays.
Yeah, you were working. I can't complain.
Some of them. Dear Dr. Dan, well, look what came to roost here in Minnesota. After a couple of weeks of people pulling receipts to rub S. Darnold's success in my face, look who's going to get the last laugh. It's me. Time for me to turn the tables and respond to all the internet trolls and remind them who was right about S. Darnold. I'll have plenty of time to do so on my flight to the Dominican Republic during the NFC Championship game, which, of course, was booked before the season began. Yours in Guillotine League glory. See you at the next Friday football feast next season. P. Charchian. I love starting with P. Charchian.
That's brilliant. That's brilliantly played. Well, of course, the fatal flaw for P. Charchian is his guy isn't exactly bathed in glory either.
We're not worried about that.
He got benched. He didn't even finish the season with the year one of this massive deal. He couldn't even last the entire year. So I guess it all depends on whose ox is being gored.
It's time for Dr. Dan's Inbox.
Letters. Oh, we get letters. We get your letters every day.
Dear Dr. Dan, thank you for providing some balance and sanity to the discussion of my team's losses to the Lions and Rams over the last couple of weeks. Finally, someone acknowledged that the offensive line didn't do me any favors. Sure, I may have held onto the ball a little bit too long, but at least I don't fumble as often as Kirk Cousins. I was brought in here for my arm. Everybody knows I can't run it like L. Jackson or Jay Allen. The simpletons think all the problems will be solved by just inserting a more fatigue guy, J.J. McCarthy, next fall. Well, I'm here to tell you he won't win 14 games if he gets the same protection I got. It's hard to hear the quarterback whisper or talk when you are looking out of the ear hole of your helmet after every single play. S. Darnold.
Well, in S. Darnold's defense, if you go back to the week before, it's lucky he wasn't taken out on a stretcher. I mean, he got knocked around a lot. And I know these guys are made to be tough and it's part of the job, but nobody can tell me that doesn't have a bit of an impact. Not only perhaps on how you play that game, but maybe even how you play the next and how willing you are to run the ball. And I don't think he got physically punished against the Rams to the same degree, but 9 sacks is a lot of sacks, and he took some pretty significant hits. So I would also say to S. Darnold, though, be careful going too far with this because you just missed, for 2 straight weeks, especially the Lions game, you just missed wide open people. And there were even times in the Rams game where you missed wide open people, and there is such a thing as throwing the ball away. Somewhere along the way, he forgot that, and there's also such a thing. Well, yeah.
Not just throwing it away because you're inaccurate.
That's correct. Of occasionally, doing what he did earlier, which was pivoting out of trouble and taking 3 yards or just at least getting back to the line of scrimmage so that instead of 2nd and 19, it is 2nd and 10.
It's time for Dr.
Another angle, same guy.
Inbox.
Letters. Oh, we get letters. We get your letters every day.
Dear Dr. Dan, the disrespect, pretty thick. Like Byerly's sandwich meat thick. We were supposed to win 6.5 games. I obliterated that by week 8. I was face masked, hit late, Never got the PI call when JJ was mugged every game, etc. If my name was P. Mahomes, J. Allen, L. Jackson, you know I get a couple of those calls. But that's not the most disrespectful thing that's happened to me this year. 2 weeks ago, I earned the highest achievement of my career. And a certain local radio host from 3 to 6:30 has failed to call me by the hard-earned new title that he still does to T. Bridgewater. Now I know how our Dangerfield felt. Respectfully, Pro Bowl quarterback S. Darnold.
That's true. He is, isn't he?
That's a callback
That's a
from
good one.
writer Bo here.
That's pretty good.
Pro Bowl quarterback Ted Bridgewater is what we call him.
And Sam Darnold, is he not a Pro Bowl quarterback?
He is a Pro Bowl quarterback.
No question about that.
Still, they can't take that. They can't do what the refs did in the Rams game and throw a flag after the fact and take away the Pro Bowl.
That's true.
Once you've earned the Pro Bowl, they can't take it back.
Now, will he play in the flag football Pro Bowl game?
I think he has to.
Is that part of the deal?
Why wouldn't he?
Well,
There's no pass
does he
rush.
want to at this point? I don't know.
He doesn't have to worry about a line.
It never ceases to amaze, I guess, like I said, how quickly it went from, nicknames and celebration and how many years should we give him and should we franchise him and trade him or just franchise him because we intend to keep him because he's that good. It feels like only yesterday because it was almost only yesterday. If we're playing the 0 to 10 game, 10 being a deadlock certainty, S. Darnold is back in a Vikings uniform next year, 0, no chance. What number are you going with today?
Well, before today, I would have gone like 4. And then I heard T. Pelissero on with the P-Trip, and he basically said, I think he's coming back. And so I trust T. Pellissero's reporting and instincts and how the league works, so I'm going to go like 6.5, 7.
I still think, I'm going to stick with where you were before. I still think it's a 4. I have to find out, because the key to that question has to be what the market is.
Yeah,
really
the money.
is.
Yep, what the money's going to be for him.
If they're going to bring him back, I just don't think they're going to be willing to bring him back at big money. I threw out the hypothetical to C. Scoggins about, okay, what if you can get him 1 year, $20 million? The market collapses. And
like the Vikings' pocket.
And he, especially the interior part of it, and he loves it here. Might you be able to, would you do it then? I would. I would do it 1 year, $20 million. With, as C. Scoggins said, the stipulation that he understands, it ain't his job necessarily. It might be his job until it's not, and eventually it might be JJ's job, but I think we got to be careful assuming JJ's just going to walk in, and we're never winning 14 games again. Just be us. It ain't going to happen. That's the frustrating part of this is you want to take advantage of one of those like seasons. We ain't going to win. We're 14-3. Forget it.
It's time for
Ever?
Dr. Dan's
Ever.
Wow.
Inbox.
What if we go to 18-game seasons?
Well, that
that's
could
right
change-
around the corner.
that could change
Could we be
everything,
14-4?
Yeah.
Dear Dr. Dan, did you happen to see the reporting from L. Neal III? The offers have been rolling in. Twins fans may not have me to kick around much longer. Hope you're enjoying the Hot Stove League. Sincerely, Jay Polat.
Well, I keep hearing that there's like they've created like they had to go out and get a second file cabinet with all the offers.
There's a lot of Ishbias that are interested.
How many Ishbias are there? Do we know? 9,
I know there's
10?
2, but maybe there's more Ishbias.
And maybe that's true, but that doesn't mean a hell of a lot, right? Because it sounds sexy to leak to Lavelle E. Neal III that we got a bunch of offers, but what do you mean by offer? What do you mean by sniffing? Remember when he told us who was the pitcher that we were like number 2 and we actually talked to and we were going to be like number 2 in line to get. He was a long time ago considered one of the best free agent pitchers on the market.
Are you talking about Yu Darvish?
Darvish, remember that?
Who went to the Cubs?
Yes,
got an extra year.
And Lava made it sound like we talked to him. We were in the ball game. Just nobody knew we're going to get blown out of the water by the Cubs. We were never in the ball game for him. So I'm a little worried about whether this might be the same thing about all these offers, because in the end, a lot of it might be sniffing around the team as opposed to actual bona fide, legitimate offers that might get the attention of all of your favorite Polats.
It's time for Dr. Dan's Inbox.
Oh, we get letters. We get your letters every day.
Dear Dr. Dan, I was the voice of several generations of fans. I delighted the masses in movies and television. I provided entertaining literature. I held B. Gibson's hand. I was second only to V. Scully in the hearts. of MLB fans. Nobody had more fun than me. As I walk into the cornfield, I know you love that movie too, I have but one question for you. Which recently departed legend should I have a catch with first? That from B. Euchre.
Oh, my. That's a good one. Very, very
Who should
poignant.
B. Euchre hang out with today?
I'll have to think about that a little bit. That's a, well, it's got to be like one of the old-timers, doesn't it? I would think. Don't
Yeah.
you want to go way, way back?
Yep.
I mean, you don't want it to be that recent. I assume it's got to be, a Lou Gehrig, a Babe Ruth. Well, Ty Cobb was supposed to be kind of a bad guy. Maybe you don't want to hang with him. I'm not exactly sure.
What about Hank Aaron?
Aaron would be good, too.
Milwaukee Brave?
Absolutely. Yeah, Henry Aaron. Has he been gone long enough, though?
I just looked it up. 4 years?
Yeah, 4 years. That's a
About
decent
4
amount
years.
of time. I'm thinking back, in the bad old days or the good old days. Well, we're going to be owing Mr. Euchre with our guy Cato Kalin, who grew up, of course, in Milwaukee and has got all kinds of Cato connections, including his dad has a huge connection with Bob Euchre, and we got some sound we're going to play too. That is a kind of one of those famous Euchre anecdotes as offered up by the late great Norm Macdonald on the David Letterman
Yeah,
show.
they might be hanging out today, honestly.
That's very possible,
we
too.
got this a lot today, so we should mention it. A lot of people wondered if we were going to get C. Provis on, Corey Provis.
Yes.
Because he obviously worked with Euchre for 3 years in Milwaukee right before he came here. Corey's calling the Gopher game tonight on Big Ten Network, I think. And so he said today would probably be a little tight. May have him on tomorrow if it's still working. And I think we should.
That's
because
fair. Yes, 100%.
It's always good to have Provis, and he's got some great stories. Let's do one walk-off here that just came in. We're going to try to stay on schedule because we're out at 6. We don't want to be late for the K-Train because you never know what's going to happen with the
It
K-Train.
could go any direction.
Time for Dr. Dan's Inbox.
We can go pear-shaped pretty quickly with the K-Train.
Yes.
We get letters. We get your letters every day.
Dear Dr. Dan, you cut me short. One more thing. I'm fired up today. How come I've never been Employee of the Month at iHeart Minneapolis in the newsletter? What do you have to do? Tell Guardsy to focus and get it done. G. Mason.
G. Mason. Yeah, he was on fire yesterday. Far, wasn't he? It never stops with him. Here's going to be the tough part. The original plan is he'll join us next week after the national championship game.
Yep.
He's going to beg again to stay on forever. That's the thing.
And he's going to be in studio.
Oh, that's true.
And we're going to have him later because the llama's in 3:30 to 4:30.
Oh,
Mason's
does he
gonna
know
have to be-
about that yet? Is he going to pout?
No, but I'll tell him.
Yeah. That's a
tell
big show. Mace and the llama both in studio?
Yeah.
Man.
It could be. We could also move Mace.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe we do that. I don't know.
Well, we'll talk about it.
We'll figure it out.
Maybe Euchre goes and talks to V. Scully. That wouldn't be bad either, would
I'd
it?
love to hear that, man.
Be outstanding. Top 5 will include?
Wolves, wild, and a lot of culture of collaboration, alignment, intentionality, and using every inch of grass.
Or is there a schism?